Please follow the link below to donate to the Onyx Tavern for as low as $1 a month, and remember to submit your fan art to onyxtavern@gmail.com. Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, bringing you episode 214 here at the Tavern, where tonight we're going to discuss the what-ifs of the first season of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Now, little background, little context. First of all, I am overjoyed that my daughter and I get to sit down and watch television together when her mother's working, and that whenever we watch TV together, the one thing she wants to watch more than anything else is Power Rangers. She's like, Daddy, Daddy, Power Rangers, Power Rangers, and let's watch Power Rangers. And I'm just like, I'm so happy that my soon-to-be 3-year-old is in love with the Power Rangers now. And of course, that's in no small part to the fact that she is named after the original Yellow Ranger. I mean, it's the cutest thing, guys. Whenever the show comes up and Trini comes in the opening credits, she goes, "It's Trini Ranger! That's me!" and, oh, wow. I mean, I just can't describe how happy that makes me. And just the fact that we are sitting together and we are enjoying the same show that I watched 25 years ago, and she just loves it. And the thing is, she won't even watch the other shows. I mean, she won't watch Wild Force, she won't watch Dino Charge, and thank goodness she won't watch RPM. She says she wants to watch the one with Trini Ranger in it. That's all she cares about, with the dinosaurs and the elephant. And for some reason, she thinks the Triceratops is a rhino, but I'll correct that as we go along. It's just great. And of course, this gives me the opportunity, not only spend time with my daughter and share in the series, but a chance to actually go back and re-watch Mighty Morphin. Simply because, honestly, other than a few key episodes for some research I've been doing, I really haven't taken the time to sit down and re-watch Mighty Morphin with my modern interpretation of the series and criticisms and so forth. I mean, it's a completely different series from when I was a kid, based on the fact that, of course, we've had the 24 years since then. I know what Sentai is. I've actually seen all of Zyurangers since then. And, of course, my film critiques and stuff and things I've learned about editing and all that kind of stuff. It's a completely different show from when I was 6 to when I am now 32 with all this history in there. So, while Trini's watching it for, the Zords and the Rangers and all that kind of stuff, I'm just looking at, like, why did they edit that? Or that seems like an odd sound choice right there. And it's like, couldn't they have changed that line of dialogue? I'm getting to full critique mode for the series. Hopefully one day doing reviews of episodes. But in any case, it's a fresh take for me to rewatch Mighty Morphin and go over a couple of things with the series. And it really got me to thinking, why is it that Saban decided to make Mighty Morphin Power Rangers this Teenagers with Attitude series? The main comment that you get from people who either dislike Power Rangers, watched it when they were kids, or really don't know anything about it, is they always describe it backhandedly as Saved by the Bell with Godzilla stock footage in there. And I think that's an unfair assessment. I mean, if you want to be really negative and critical, I mean, we can do that with just about any franchise out there. Can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but I'm just saying, it seems like it's more of an attack on the show other than a clear analysis of exactly what's going on. But of course, people need to make comedy, people need to make drama, yada yada, whatever, and stuff like that. But of course, people remember that particular aspect of the series of, the teenagers, they have the high school, Bulk and Skull, and then for some strange reason, they think that there is this formula where the Rangers, every single episode, will have an issue that is resolved through the fighting of the monster by the end of the episode. And while that does happen at times, it's not really something that happens in every episode. A lot of episodes are unique in a lot of different ways. And that's something you guys probably should know if you've watched my Morphin. If you haven't, go back and rewatch it. There are a lot of episodes that don't follow formula, which is pretty cool. But to my original point, teenagers with attitude, that's what people are remembering from the series. And I just kind of thought to myself, could this series have worked if they had used the exact same plot line from Zyuranger? Because the curious thing is, Power Rangers from time to time will do a one-to-one translation from the Sentai into the series, Samurai being a prime example. And of course, other times they'll deviate wildly from the formula, Lost Galaxy being my prime example for that as well. And for the very first series, they decided not to follow too closely with the Sentai footage to get rid of the mystical knights thing with dinosaurs and set in the modern day. And ultimately, we know that worked out for the series. You know, it's fondly remembered, probably not as fondly as it should be. And of course, now here we are, 25th anniversary looming amongst us. But I just kind of wonder, would it have been as successful a series, or probably a better series, if they had decided to go with the Dinosaur Knights approach from Zyuranger? And I wonder that because, you know, what was it about the Zyuranger that decided to go ahead and change? You know, why did they decide to drop that particular aspect? Because I think the detriment that that does to the series, when you actually look at it in terms of the mythology of the first season, and of course what we get later on throughout the entirety of the series, is that a lot of the mythology and backstory that they were trying to build is rather muddied and doesn't make a lot of sense. And there are some editing issues and things that also don't make sense. Let me give you guys two examples of what I mean here, to where changing it to the teenage aspect made it less interesting. And that is in comparison to the Sentai, which I know that's not fair, or at least you guys are going to tell me that, but the thing is, Sentai makes sense with what it's doing. If you actually watch the Zyuranger episodes, what's happening makes sense. There's a logical narrative going on. It's like, A, B, C, D, whatever. But when it comes to Power Rangers, in the first season, it goes from A to Q to R, back to B, and finally to C. That's kind of where it's going. So let me give you just two basic examples here. So the episode with the power eggs, or why Zordon gives a brief explanation of the morphing masters contain a universe of power within two eggs and putting those eggs afloating at sea. Doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? And the fact that the Rangers need to find them and prevent Rhea from getting them. However, in the Zyuranger in the Zyuranger series, is essentially the last two dinosaur eggs being sent off to sea as a way of hiding them from Bandora and helping to preserve the species. Now, it's been a while since I've seen that particular episode, so there are probably a little bit more details in there. But there's a significant difference between the Morphing Masters and the Power Eggs, and of course the ancient dinosaur tribes and the last two dinosaur eggs. So the Zyuranger episode makes a lot more sense because the mythology makes sense. It's grounded, there's an idea of where it's going and what you're going to do with it. And of course, dinosaur eggs play a major role within the series, having its own arc, and of course showing up at the end of the series. Whereas the power eggs are a one-and-done MacGuffin. And that's something that you'll see throughout my Morphins. There are these one-done MacGuffins which have more significance in the Zyuranger series because of the built-up mythology. And that's one of the first things I'm thinking of, is that if Power Rangers had gone to the Mystic Dinosaur Knights aspect, then maybe the mythology elements could have been more well-defined and would have made more sense. Would they have gone the route of the last two dinosaur eggs? Possibly. I don't know for sure if that would have been something they would have considered, but to actually have something like that would have made a lot more sense than kind of making up as they go along. And that's kind of the sense I got, is like once they decided that we're not doing the knights, we're going to be doing teenagers, and they've kind of had to make up this mythology with no rhyme and reason, because again, in Zyuranger, everything is connected in some way or another. Whereas in Power Rangers, they are all disconnected elements. The singing squash, the mirror of destruction, all this stuff, they are separate elements that are not tied together in any meaningful way. So again, the first thing I'm thinking is you have these disparaging elements which should be connected in some way, but because of the plot you've constructed, it's broken them apart to the detriment of the story. And of course, the other example I want to give is an impressing engagement where Jason is trying to set a bench press record, which anybody who does competitive weightlifting or anything, you can comment below on the validity of Jason's actions in the episode and how this is actually run, because I'm a little confused about it. I mean, first, I'm not sure how Bulk originally won this record, and if Jason's competing for like a world record or a local record or whatever and all that. But whatever. Ultimately, the episode is about Jason trying to compete on his own and function without the other Rangers, which, oddly enough, it comes back to teamwork in the end, and of course the entire series is about teamwork, whatever, and he's fighting, King Sphinx, because King Sphinx is just a monster in the episode. Now, of course, when we look at the Japanese footage in Zyuranger, it is a Sphinx monster, Dora Sphinx, which gives riddles to children, traps them in trees, and of course, because Sphinx are known for riddles and whatnot, and of course the Rangers have to guess the riddle and save the children and all that. Now, I'm not saying that as a plot they need to do a one-for-one translation for, but consider that they took footage from an episode where the villain is very active in the plot when they're not a monster and gives real danger to the situation, and of course when they fight him at the end, it kind of means more because the children are in danger, as opposed to a monster they throw into a situation that has nothing to do with what's going on in the teenage plot. And of course you're going to get that a lot. I think life works like that. Not everything you do in the normal course of the day is always going to relate to something you have at your job, something you have with your family, yada yada and stuff. But narratively speaking, you have to try and tie those elements in. And of course, Mighty Morphin really had a hard time trying to tie any type of element in, at least in the early seasons. I mean, again, we have, cleanup clubs and statues and stuff like it. Like, that's an episode really kind of so we want to save this statue, and the teenagers are the only ones doing it, and there's no history behind the statue, it's just a statue. Whereas in, again, Zyuranger, there was a clear history to it, an emotional and significant reason why it was there, why destroying it is bad, and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm saying is, Zyuranger set the template for all these things for Power Rangers to go on. Now, they chose, or most likely chose, not to use any of those elements, and we come up with these disparaging elements that just don't go together, just don't flow. So, had they decided to do the Mystic Dinosaur Knight plot, would that have really worked for the series? Would that have been something that could have made Power Rangers better? And ultimately, I'm going to lean on yes. Now, am I glad for what we got? Yeah. I just kind of feel that if they had gone that route of adapting the Dinosaur Knight aspect of it into it, I think it would have been well received. I think it would have been interesting for people to go ahead and watch. I just don't think the creative staff could have handled it in a meaningful way. But I think off the bat that if you could have kept the similar story where Rita is responsible for the death of the dinosaurs or some other big calamity, whatever. She is sealed away by Zordon, he who can still be a giant floating ahead in the tube and with Alpha and all that. And of course, they have to have 5 warriors in suspended animation that are reawakened in the future. I think that solves a lot of problems with the issues I think people are having, not only then, but in retrospect. So, for example, again, as I talked before, Zordon seems a little incompetent in the way that he is choosing warriors, and this is something that is called out directly in the Mighty Morphin comic series And to an extent, yes, in the Power slash Rangers fan film, the fact that he is getting unexperienced youth into fighting this war. Now, that's kind of glossed over in the series. It's never really addressed, and it becomes even worse by the time we get to Justin, because there is no excuse for why you bring Justin into this situation, given who he is and what his lack of experience is. But I think those issues are immediately resolved when Trini and Kimberly are princesses from a warrior culture, and Jason, Zach, and Billy are princes, future kings, whatever, of dinosaur tribes. I think that itself would help justify why these characters are Rangers. Again, the series doesn't really go into detail why Kimberly is the best choice of all the people in the world to be the Pink Ranger, but if she was chosen by her people to be an emissary of peace or of war or whatever and stuff, then I think that would have worked a little bit better in the series' favor, because immediately off the bat we have an understanding of why these people are the Power Rangers. Um, and then of course there is the teenage aspect that we have, because I'll agree that it is a little boring. I mean, it's the 90s, and frankly, I'd take boring over some of the crap that's on television depiction of high schools nowadays. I mean, wow. I mean, I went to Getty's and I was watching something on television from Disney Channel. I'm like, yeah, this is pure fantasy. This no one is like this. But in any case, um, I think having that aspect, which is probably the most boring aspect of the series, most mundane, and you replace it with that fish out of water narrative, I think that could have brought more drama, more comedy, more interest into the series. What if it was the fact that the characters had to go to high school because they need a proper education, because they are 10,000 years, 65 million, however you want to go ahead and slice it, behind the time, so they do need to go ahead and get themselves an education of some kind. And they have to go to school, and of course they still can do all the stuff they normally do, but now it's kind of like, oh, but Billy's super smart even for modern day and all that. And of course, Bulk and Skull gets in, and they don't understand these guys. Maybe they want to expose them a little bit of those elements from season 2, yada yada. I think it would have been a little bit more interesting, because not only do you have more interesting characters in that regard, but then you have the past meets the present, and you have that dynamic to go ahead and deal with. Because I do of course remember the episode where the cleanup crew and the Rangers wanted help the environment and stuff, and of course they're just looked at as proactive teenagers trying to do better for their community, which is great, and I believe that's the message that Saban was trying to go ahead and promote. But what if we could sprinkle in a little bit of that? Look how far humanity has come. We used to live in nature, and now, they're ruining it. And of course, the people who are most in tune with nature, who lived with the land and so forth, are the ones trying to go ahead and champion it, get people to change their minds and so forth. Because I think at that point, then we could have a little bit of social commentary into the series. That, yeah, we have active teenagers in the original series, trying to do stuff, but now we have people from essentially another world that have that outsider perspective on humanity, not so much judging us, but questioning what has happened to humanity to lead us to this road, and what can we do to help mend those problems. So again, I think that in the hands of talented writers, and some of the Mighty Morphin writers were talented, obviously, but I think that's a dynamic that you could go with. I just kind of think that it would also give a little bit more weight and a larger world to the Power Rangers. I mean, let's narrow our scope real quick to just the first 60 episodes of the series, which is what they intended to do up until Doomsday, before they got renewed for another series. I mean, obviously, since then, we've been to so many different worlds and galaxies and alternate dimensions and time travel, seen so many aliens. We've hopped across the world from Istanbul to Eastern Europe and Australia and North Pole and all those places. We've done all this in Power Rangers. But in those first 60 episodes, I think the most interesting place that they went was a cabin in the woods. And those episodes, honestly, they feel really small. The conflict feels very small. Not so much an intimate conflict because Rita has no personal conflict with the Rangers, but it just seems rather small that the only people that are doing this are our teenagers with attitude, and the only threat is Rita. So it doesn't have that larger world to it. It does seem like it's almost in a bubble. Um, and I just wonder that if there was a more consistent mythology, if there was a backstory that was more developed, if that could have made the Power Rangers look a little bit bigger in their world. And this is not something I think happened in Zyuranger, and again, that's totally different because that's a 16th season of an ongoing franchise. We're talking about the first season of Power Rangers where the assumption is, and this is kind of way I look at film, is that when you go into a film, you have certain assumptions of the time and place you're going to be. I mean, I think the default is if you have no idea what you're about to watch, you have to piece it together: who, what, when, where, why, how, so forth. And of course, when we come in the Power Rangers, the where and when is America now. I mean that's basically what we get, and of course we have to fill in the blanks of what else is going on in the rest of the world in relation to our characters. But when those characters don't interact with the rest of the world, when they don't go beyond the scope of their one town or their one adventure, then we kind of lose sight of that. That we don't look that it's this massive world with all these interconnecting people. It's just this one tiny group that's doing their thing. And I just think, again, Dinosaur Knight aspect, that you can make the world larger with a greater mythology. Because, yeah, where and when is now, but what happened before to inform where we are at this point. Um, so yeah, I mean, just I'm thinking a bigger narrative, a bit bigger history for the characters. I think would have worked out. A fish out of water scenario, understanding of why these characters are chosen as the Power Rangers, and you can keep all the same elements. I just kind of think that it would have given them more personality. It would have made it a little bit more interesting. And then you could do the things like dinosaur eggs, or you could do things like the Sphinx, or these monsters being known to the Rangers at some previous point, books of prophecy and all that. Of course, Mighty Morphin decided to go the more technological angle, which is something completely opposite to Zyuranger, and I think it works because the narrative that you are getting is that you have Rita, the representation of the old world, where Zora has a representation of the new in his embrace and utilization of technology. Now, of course, he still uses magic as a core, but supplemented by technology, and that could still be a through line that you have. If you decide to do Dinosaur Knight part of it, to where Zordon's like, hey, 65 million years ago, whenever, Rita beat us, but now we have technology, so we're one step ahead of the game with her because it is in technology that we have to rely on, not this arcane magic that defeated us all those years ago. So again, that's something that they could have done, have been more pronounced than what it is, because why does Zordon use technology in Power Rangers? I have no idea. It's never really explained. Why does Rita utilize magic, but then sometimes she also has technological devices? Never explained. And again, I'm not talking about rewriting the history of Power Rangers here. I'm just saying that if we had gone this element where we weren't in the mundane, and I think that's where it comes from, is that it's a fantastic show for half of it. But the other half is the mundane, is the everyday, it is the familiar. It's not the fantastic. It's not going to different worlds and in different times. The Island of Illusion is well, again, Cabin in the Woods, Island of Illusion. Those are probably the two most interesting places that the original cast ever went in the original in the first 60 episodes. But what if we could have made it seem more interesting, seem a little bit bigger? Maybe they did do some globe trotting. Maybe we had flashbacks to the past, of course, by the time you get to Tommy, modern day hero, in the past. I mean, like, what's that from Mortal Kombat? Liu Kang's in love with Katana. She's 10,000 years old. Heck, think about Tommy being in love with Kimberly, and she's 65 million years old. Doesn't that make it seem a little bit more interesting to their relationship, other than just Bland Valley Girl and Karate Dude? I mean, I'm just spitballing some ideas here, but it ultimately comes back to why Saban decided to go ahead and do it. And if I had to take a guess, it would be that grounded in reality thing. Because, I mean, swords and sorcery, from what I'm told, because I don't remember much of the 80s, because I was, born in them. Swords and sorcery was a big thing in the 80s, and that seemed to kind of die down a little bit in the 90s, where dinosaurs become the main feature. Of course, which is why one of the reasons Power Rangers took off is because of the dinosaurs. But I think they felt they needed to ground the series in a familiar place, in a familiar time, and then throw in the fantastical elements. Because I think if they did the whole, 65 million years ago, this is what happened to come into modern day, it may have lost some potential audience members because they might have felt it was too out there, it was too weird. Because Power Rangers is a weird show when you think about it. When you take all the elements and throw them together, it's a really weird and unusual show. In a good way, of course. But could audiences have sat through that with all the history and the backstory, or was something more simple needed? And it seems that they felt that something more simple was indeed needed, and that's where they went with. And of course, now, other shows have been able to get away with not so simple things. Lost Galaxy, RPM. But really, shows in the Neo Saban era were pretty safe. They are set in the modern day. They are set with pretty much normal characters outside of Samurai, but they're, again, that's kind of an unusual thing right there. But Saban's kind of been playing it safe, whereas in the past they've been trying different things, going into space, and again, making the show more interesting. But they had to ground it in the beginning to get to those fantastical elements, because again, it took us 6 years to get into space. And I don't think like Power Rangers in Space could have been a concept for the first season. That they had to start with the mundane, and just as we went along, made it more interesting, as opposed to it already being interesting. If you guys can follow along with me on that. But excuse me. I just, again, going back and watching these episodes, I would have liked to have seen like Mighty Morphin Zyuranger, basically, to see them take those elements and kind of work in there. Because again, just as a real quick aside, and I was just kind of thinking about this as we're talking right now, the teens are from a multicultural group, and all that, and you know, what if global unity was like one of the themes of the series? Because again, if we assume they took in 65 million years ago, they were in Pangea, the world was united. So you have, Asia, Africa, Americans, whatever, Europeans, all those different cultures represented, and they're the five representatives. That's why there's an Asian girl and a black guy, and of course, Austin St. John. I think he's part Native American, part Mexican. Yeah, I'll have to look at that. But my point is, you have those different cultures, and maybe there is a reason to have the multicultures in there, because they are representative of all the peoples of the world, and tie it to like before the Tower of Babel kind of thing. Whatever, throw that kind of interesting stuff in there is what I'm saying, as opposed to, isn't it odd that we have this multicultural group of people, that don't hang out with other people in their own cultural groups and all that. I don't know. It's just some food for thought, that something that could have been added in there. I'd love to see, Saban do, or excuse, not Saban, Hasbro now. Yeah, thank goodness Hasbro. Let's see Hasbro try something interesting. That's what I want to see. Like, I think for the next Power Rangers series, I don't want to see anything safe. I don't want to see teenagers with attitude. I don't want to see kids in high school. I don't want to see, normal everyday town. Let's do, again, Beast Morphers. Let's have it on Marinoy. Let's have, in another dimension or another time in the future, whatever and stuff. Let's go away from the familiar, and let's see what we can do with the series. Because I do think that when Power Rangers strays away from the familiar, In Space, Lost Galaxy. I think when we can get those types of shows, that's when it's usually at its best, when it is trying all this weird and unique and different stuff. And they couldn't do it with the first season, but maybe they can do it with future seasons. So what do you guys think about this? Do you think that the Teenagers with Attitude was a smart idea at the time, or would you have liked to seen the Dinosaur Knight concept, or is it too much like the Sentai? Which, real quick, I think had they done the Dinosaur Knight thing at that time, they could have gone away with it. I think in the advent of the internet, you can't do that anymore. But for the first season, yeah, you could have done that. But what are your all's opinions? What do you think about this? Leave a comment below and let me know. Um, hey, otherwise, thank you guys for listening. Have a good evening. And the tavern is now closed.